Okay, welcome back. Let's talk about training for the Appalachian Trail 2021. It is still February 22nd. I'm still on my training hike, and I'll cut to the chase here, start at the end and work my way back. I am completing about 180 miles to be done in 3 weeks. I take off, once finished with this, I'll be finished by Friday. I'll take that weekend and the next week off, and I'll travel and start hiking on Sunday, March 7th. I'm going to start in Wherein, Tennessee, as I've indicated, and we'll head north from there. So, the big push is what I refer to this. Get a lot of miles in, back-to-back days, and get the body used to short rest periods, like overnight. Go get more miles the next day. And that's it's beneficial because that's what you do when you're hiking the trail. Now, 200 miles or 180, that's a lot compressed into a short time, but it goes a long ways to developing what's known as trail legs, where you're a little bit more comfortable with your mileage. Last year, I did 200 at this point. And before that, I did a god-awful lot of miles, but we'll talk about that here in a second. Now, I'll go to a little story here. In Franklin, North Carolina, I stopped at an outfitter's. Outdoor 76 was the name of the place. Nice place, nice people, but I was having trouble with the downhills. My knees were starting to talk to me. And I had a question about knee braces. And they sent me to this one fella. He happens to be a co-owner. And I'll call him out by name, but it's not necessary. It's the guy with the speech. And he has this speech for hikers. So the first thing he says to me is, "Your knees are bothering you? Going downhill?" "Yes." "Well, hell, listen, tell me, how many miles a day are you doing?" And I said, "Well, we're pushing up towards 15s at this point." "15s? That's crazy." Now look, he launches into this speech and tells me about Major League Baseball pitchers when they arrive at training camp. They don't throw a baseball for the first week. And then he starts talking about, I don't know, pro bowlers and golfers and God knows what else. He had a great speech. I enjoy a good speech. So it was obviously done before, well rehearsed, and I wanted to hear what he had to say. And towards the end, he started talking about cyclists and how he's a cyclist and how he learned how to cycle and get distance and all this stuff. Well, let me tell you, wait a minute, here's a beautiful tree I want to show you. Let's just turn the camera around. This is a live oak tree here in Fernandina Beach, Florida. The place is full of them, but this is a young one that you can see is just gorgeously formed. A trunk, I can't get my arms around him, but I can get a little bit over halfway. There's some in here that I couldn't even try. But I like this guy because he's so well formed and he's not received too much damage from weather and things like this. All right, so back to the speech. The man is telling me all about how cyclist and how he trained as a cyclist. Now, he lives in the mountains, and I'll give him credit for that. any cyclists that do, they need to be proud of what they do, because that's hard work. And that's a great training ground. So my hat's off to him for that. I give him credit. But that was starting to edge on me a little bit, because I know something about cycling. And as a matter of fact, right before I started the trail, my sister and I rode from Vancouver, British Columbia, south to the Mexico border along the Pacific coast. And then we ended that trip in late July. I started training for the AT right away, and I continued that training until February 25th, when I took off. Now, in that training, I'll stop at the end, or I'll start at the end and go back again. I did 600 miles, and then I tacked on the 200 at the end, so I did 800 miles and prep for the trail. Now that's insane. I know. I'm retired. A lot of people aren't. They just can't do miles like that. That's fine. I understand. But the backstory is, I had never been hiking before. Never had a backpack on for any distance like that. And I had a lot to learn. I had a lot to learn about how to work my trekking poles. I had a lot to learn about how to work my feet on broken trail. This trail in here is a pretty fast track as hiking goes. It's sandy and nice and flat, but there's a lot of roots, and I would pummel my feet on the roots until I simply learned how to walk and stop kicking into things and step over them. I valued that total of 800 miles greatly, and by the time I got to the trail, I was in pretty good shape. Now, I was hiking with a guy, a good friend of mine, trail name Rock Shocks, and this guy could go downhill like a skier on moguls. And I would keep up with him. And after a while of doing that, my knees were talking to me, because anybody can tell you that's been hiking before in the mountains, it's the downhills that are going to hurt you. And where I live, it's fairly flat. The biggest downhill here is maybe 25 feet in elevation, if that. So on the AT, there's large steps where you're bearing all your weight as you slowly go down, and you reach with your lower foot. And that puts a lot of pressure on the knees. Long story short, I just got some knee braces and worked myself out of that. The braces were just Walgreens specials. Nothing tricky about them. They just stabilized my knees, and I was good after that. So, crazy miles, but the best thing I did was that 200 in consecutive days. So the point being, I got this tip from Jupiter on YouTube, that if you can get away and do 200 miles before you start a through hike, you're way better off. And I happen to agree with him. So this year, as I move forward, I got off the trail March 25th, and the state park here is closed for COVID, and they opened up in May. And as soon as they did, I took my pack out, and once a week from May all the way to latter part of February here, I was hiking once a week with a 30-pound pack, which is heavier than I normally carry in the field. on a trail, unless I'm packing a lot of food for some reason. And I kind of kept loose that way, and it helped me just to go once a week and take the time. I could knock that out 15 miles in about 6 hours with a lunch break. And it's been good training for me. Now, that's a little nuts for most people, but that's how I did it. And the story behind that is the injuries that I've been working with through the years. My back, an MRI explanation of what they see in my lower back takes about a full page, single spaced. It's awful. It's bad. But more than that, my feet were operated on, both of them. And the surgeon that did the work was an ultra marathoner. And when I came out of surgery, he told me, he said, Carl, he said, your running days are over. If you choose to run with what you have going on in your feet right now, you're going to hurt yourself and do great damage, and might not be able to walk. So, all right, so years later, I take up this hiking business, and my feet were never good. I had all kinds of issues with it, but the more I hiked, the stronger they got, and that's not supposed to happen. I had a foot doctor here on the island I was talking to about walking the beach barefoot and how it bothered my feet. And here's what she said. She said, Carl, listen, feet are not muscles. So she said, if you know your way around a gym, you know that you take a dumbbell and you work your biceps and in the hopes that next week you can put on a little bit more weight and you build that muscle and it gets stronger and you can increase the weight, right? I said, yes. She goes, feet are not muscles. If it hurts your feet to walk barefoot on the beach, put some shoes on. So, bottom line here is hiking has been really good for me. And the more I hiked, the more my feet adjusted, the less my back complained. And I thank the training that I've done to go from a person who said last year, well, I'll get some equipment and maybe I'll start in Amicalola Falls and see how far I can go. And then if my feet give out or my back gives out, then I'll know.
Got one more.
Thank you. Cyclist. So anyway, I went from that. Here comes the other cyclist. Hello.
Hi. Dangerous.
All yours. Thank you. So I went from a guy who thought, I'll give this a try and see how far I can get, to a guy that started walking with a pack, training up a little bit, feeling better the further I went, and ended up in February of 2020 fully intent of making it all the way to Katahdin in Maine from Amicalola Falls in Georgia. That's one of the reasons why I hike. I'm celebrating my ability to do that kind of thing. So that's my training advice. Just get out and hike. And you don't have to do 800 miles. If you have a job, you're not going to be able to do 800 miles. But if you have the luxury of being able to do 800 miles, then go ahead and do it. Now, this year I cut back. As I said, I started in May. I'm going to finish with about 770 miles. So, we'll see how it goes. That might get me to Maine. That's my hope anyway. Thanks for watching. I welcome your time and your thoughts and comments. And we'll see how it goes. This is my final week of training. Talk to you a bit.